Hello, Canadian teen book lovers. Welcome to week 3 of my marathon of books. This week I finished my trip through Newfoundland and Labrador, and I started Nova Scotia by reading through Cape Breton Island, and I finished the week by reading from Lawrencetown, Nova Scotia. The books I'd like to talk about this week include The Book of Michael by Leslie Joyce, which I read this morning. This book is about Michael, obviously, and who is a teenage boy who was wrongly convicted of killing his girlfriend Lisa. The book is about his time in prison and then how he gets out because the person who actually killed her, comes forward, and then it's about how he puts his life back together after this life-changing experience. I really enjoyed it. It made me think. It's pretty philosophical. There are parts where I didn't really understand why Michael did what he did, or I didn't agree with what he did, but as I usually find with Leslie Joyce books, even if I don't agree with what the character has done, I understand why they do what they do, because Joyce is very good at explaining the motivations. So it was a good read. Next up is Blood Brothers in Louisbourg by Philip Roy, and it's set in the fortress of Louisbourg in 1744, when the war between the English and the French took place. So this story is told from the view of Jacques, the son of a military officer, and Two Feathers, a Métis teenager, who they're both kind of outside the war but also involved. And reading from their perspectives is very enlightening. Again, I would say it's a philosophical read, and even though it looks thin, the writing inside is really tiny, so it takes longer than you think it would take to read. But I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. It takes a dedicated reader to read this one. But I would say if you stick it out, it's worth it. Next up is Way to Go by Tom Ryan. I can't say enough good things about this book. This is my second time reading it, and I really enjoy the characters, and I feel like Ryan has somehow tapped into his inner teen to write this book because it feels so authentic. It's about Danny, a teenager who's struggling with the fact that he is gay in a small town in Cape Breton Island. He calls it Deep Cove. But I like it because it's so positive. Yes, Danny struggles with accepting who he is, but in the end, he does, and he finds some peace, which is something I think we don't see a lot of in fiction about gay teens. So I really enjoyed it. Plus, it's got a little bit of humor in there, and I have to say, as I wrote in the review, I love Danny's little sister, Alma, who always pops up with random movie quotes from Days Gone By. It's so funny. So, I would definitely recommend this one. Next up is Namesake by Sue McLeod. This is a good, I would say, kind of a more classic historical fiction. It's about this girl named Jane Grey, who's doing a school project on Lady Jane Grey, and when she gets books from the library, there's a little book that's put in with her pile that happens to be the prayer book of Lady Jane Grey. And when she opens it up and she reads from it, it acts as a time portal to take her back in time to meet Lady Jane Grey, which is so much fun. And then, as they become friends, Jane Grey and Lady Jane Grey, Jane knows the story of what's going to happen to Lady Jane Grey, which, just to refresh you, Lady Jane Grey was the 9 Days Queen in England and was eventually beheaded at the order of her cousin Mary, who became queen after her. So Jane Grey knows that Lady Jane Grey is about to be executed and is doing all that she can to find a way to get her out of the situation, either by renouncing her faith and going back to Catholicism, or by trying to find another way. I really like how Sue McLeod pulls you into the history part. It's very well done. Now this week I didn't really have any reluctant reads, so I decided instead to do a classic Canadian read. When I got to Cape Breton Island in my reading, I went from cod fishing in Newfoundland, to coal mining in Nova Scotia. And Last Chance Bay is the perfect book to talk about that. It's about so many things, but May Christie, the main character, is a girl in a small town in the 1940s who wants to be a pilot. But at the time, that seems crazy for a girl to aspire to, because she's supposed to grow up and get married and have children and support her husband as he works in the coal mine. So the book is about so many things, but it's about a girl who's trying to embrace her dreams, but also who learns that sometimes you have to put aside your dreams for the greater good of your family and your friends. It's very well written, and I really enjoyed it, and I would say this was my favorite book of the week. It's full of great spirit, and it's a very enjoyable read. So this week, as I said, I've transferred from Newfoundland to Nova Scotia. I've read my way through Cape Breton Island, and now I'm in Lawrencetown, Nova Scotia, reading Leslie Joyce. I found this week that I read a lot of history books, historical fiction. I went from learning about the mercantile system with The Sky with Black Crows to Blood Brothers in Louisburg, learning about the war between the French and the English in the 1700s, to Last Chance Bay, which is set in the 1940s, World War II, and also the 1500s with Lady Jane Grey, and last but not least, 1994 with Way to Go. No way you know, well, he says it's 1994, but you also know because they have mixtapes. When I read it was Labrador and Newfoundland, A Sky with Black Crows, the interesting thing was I encountered this use of the word wonderful. Nowadays, or for a few years now, people use the word sick to describe something as good. So it's counterintuitive, and it always throws me off when I hear it. And when I read A Sky with Black Crows, the opposite happened. It was an expression like wonderful bad, which stuck in my head. I never heard wonderful used that way to describe something as being extremely terrible. or extremely something. Yeah, so I enjoyed that. Last week I was interviewed by the Chronicle Herald in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and yesterday the article came out on my marathon of books. So if you'd like to read it, you can check it out on my Facebook or my Twitter. That brings us to stats. So far, with 3 weeks, I've read 21 books out of 365. I've read 4,333 pages, and that, going along with my calculations of 10 pages per kilometer, that would make it 433.3 kilometers traveled. And hours of reading would be 50 hours and 45 minutes, which means I've read just over 2 days of the new year. 2 entire days, which is pretty awesome. I have 27 books so far for Nova Scotia, and that means that next week I will keep going, and I will be in Nova Scotia for about a month. Talk to you then.